Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I know, right? I'm still bald. All right, you saw the title. If I was to learn software all over again, if I was starting again in 2025, and I've gotten quite a few comments about this from people who are currently students or who people who want to transition into software, I've got two answers, and it's based on your timeline. If you need a job right now, abandon all hope. I know that that's a terrible answer, but if you are in a situation where rent is due and you have immediate financial deadlines, you are absolutely dreaming if you think that you're going to transition into the industry and get a job before you run out of money. That is a recipe for disaster. It's very unlikely to be successful. Instead, so if that's your plan, it's a fucking terrible plan. Figure something else out. The other side of that spectrum, though, what I can recommend is if you have a good enough job and you're not worried about paying bills and your job gives you some degree of free time, let's say you have 20 hours a week or 30 hours a week, you can do your evenings and you can do weekends. That is a perfect recipe for easing into the software industry. And you need to take this from an individual perspective first and foremost. If somebody came to me and they said, Brian, I've got 6 months to transition from construction into software, I would tell them that's a bad plan. It's extremely unlikely to be successful. You're relying on not just skill and talent and hard work. You would have to get so goddamn lucky just to get your first role, even if you were offering your services for free, that you might as well be playing the lottery. However, if that same person came to me and they said, look, I've got a decent job, I'm paying my bills, I'm not worried about running out of money, I'm not worried about, I can keep doing what I'm doing for the next 24 months. And if they come to me with a 24-month horizon, I actually think that's a great idea. And I have to be totally clear about the end point here. The end point is not to get to the 24-month mark and have a 6-figure job in the industry. The end point is to get to the 24-month mark and be a candidate who is capable of applying to jobs and actually getting a job. That's the point I'm making here. 1 second. I think I have to check this. So the goal is to be capable of not just doing the job, but more importantly, passing the interview. And if you give yourself an appropriate time horizon, let's say 2 years of on the side work, so you're getting 10 or 20 hours in every weekend, and then in your evenings, you're getting a couple hours a night. Let's call it another 10 hours during the week. Maybe you're getting 20 or 30 hours in total. Over 24 months, especially with the advent of AI, by the end of that 24 months, you should have effectively every personal project that matters to you finished. If any ideas you have for websites or for applications, 24 months is more than enough time to learn those things and make them completely independent. Again, especially with AI, lean into AI. I can't stress this enough that you cannot treat AI as a replacement. AI is not meant to replace you. It's supposed to be a force multiplier. But I'm a developer. When I use AI, I'm using AI to skip busy work or to better understand something that I don't currently understand, like algorithms, for example. GPT is maybe the best algorithm teacher, because if I'm looking at especially something like recursion, which is basically time travel, I'll copy and paste that problem into GPT and I'll say, bring me step by step through this so I can visualize it, and it will. So if you've got a 24-month horizon, I would say every single day, sit down with GPT and act as if GPT is an expert that you hired to teach you. And you're going to tell GPT, I have the idea for an app that does XYZ, and I have no experience, and I'm going to need you to take me by the hand through every step of it. And you're not just going to tell me how to do things, you're going to tell me why I should do things the way that you're telling me. And you're going to tell me what the alternatives are, and you're going to tell me what the pros and cons are. And then it's your responsibility as the student to interact in a productive and useful way with your educator, which is GPT. But by the end of that 24 months, you should be more than capable of doing a basic web dev job. You should have a portfolio of finished projects, and not bullshit projects like a calculator, projects, websites and apps that actually mean something to you. You know, maybe you go to the gym. I went to the gym with a trainer for a couple of years, and he would always make a unique workout plan for that day. I saw him 3 times a week for 2 years. So that was a couple hundred workout plans. Each time we saw each other, though, he would take that plan and put it into a Google Doc. I downloaded all of that as a CSV, and I put it into an application, a desktop application, so that I can generate workouts for myself. Something simple like that, we can all find examples of in our personal life. And over that 24 months, let those examples, those things that are meaningful to you, guide you, and really lean into the curiosity that you're going to need. You're going to need an insatiable curiosity, because this is going to stop being fun immediately. If you're going to rely on just like the motivation of, hey, this is fun, that's not going to carry you through. You need to have extreme persistence and curiosity and interest in the technology. But with those things, by the end of the 24 months, you should have the things that mean something to you finished to a degree where you can interact with it satisfactorily. Maybe it's not a product that 1 million people can use. Maybe you don't have an in-depth enough understanding to scale it to an enterprise grade, but it's something that you can use for your purposes, and it's perfectly fine. That should be your standard for your own projects. It works for me because it was made for me, and that's all it needs to be. By the end of the 24 months, you should have a library of these projects, at least a handful, depending on their scale. And other than that, so that's the actual technical component. You know, how do I gain the skills to do the job? That takes care of that. And just let that be the entire curriculum. Don't go to YouTube and create a playlist of 10,000 hours of tutorials and just grind these tutorials. They will not put the knowledge in your brain the way it needs to be there. It needs to be actionable knowledge. This isn't something, you're not a chemist where you can just memorize the periodic table and then I've got that on lock for the rest of my life. No, that's not how this works. This is extremely perishable information. You will forget it the moment you stop using it. And it's technology that evolves sometimes on very short timelines. As little as 6 months can pass, and the thing that you were using, the library or the framework or whatever, it's different. It's evolved in some way, or the industry standards have evolved in some way, and you need to be able to roll with those punches. And the only way you can do that is the mentality of, I'm just going to always be studying. So that takes care of the technical component. Now, the more important side and the more difficult side, in my opinion, is passing the interview. Software interviews are horrible. Virtually all of them. So my advice is to treat this like a game and to go into it with the mentality that I'm going to play this game and I'm going to win. I'm going to learn the rules of the game and I'm going to fucking master this game. There's a great content creator, software guy. I think he works for Netflix. I think his name is the Primogen, something like that. He's a very experienced and talented engineer, and he has a Udemy course, a free course about algorithms. You should check it out. But he put it very nicely. Now, I actually disagree with a lot of what he has to say in regards to software interviews, but that's not even necessarily practical disagreement. It's sort of just personal disagreement. I just hate the notion that we're being judged on these completely abstract and dubiously useful algorithm challenges. But he describes it as a secret handshake. We all learn this thing that is completely esoteric and impossible to understand unless you're part of the group. And the secret handshake that we learn, where you invert a binary tree or some shit. You organize like inventories of a car dealership using a hash map or something completely out there. This is a secret handshake. And that secret handshake becomes one of the most important, arguably the most important component to getting face-to-face with people. Most companies, I don't know about most, but certainly big companies, most of them will send you a series of automated LeetCode code style algorithm challenges just as a filtering mechanism, where they'll send you, okay, step 1 of our 6-step interview process is here's 5 algorithms, and you have 3 to 6 minutes to solve the first 4. And then the 5th one is so hard that we would actually consider it suspicious if you finished it. And we'll give you 30 minutes to do the 5th one. And we're going to judge you based on how far you get through it. That comes from my experience. They sent me 5. The first 4, I had 3 minutes apiece. I did all 4 of those. I had 30 minutes for the last one. I did some of it. And then I thought I was going to fail because I didn't finish it. And then in my next interview, when I had an interview with a human being, I asked them about that. And they said, yeah, nobody finishes the 5th one. In fact, we would think it's suspicious if you did. We just want to see how far you can get. I was like, that's so fucking underhanded. It's like borderline malicious. Anyway, so let's say that you got this 24-month timeline. I would say pour 50% of your time, or let's say 100% of your time for like the first 12 months. And then for the second 12 months, split about half your time off for interview prep. And that interview prep should be almost entirely algorithm practices. If you're not so mathematically inclined, you should expect to have to do hundreds of practice challenges, and you should expect to have to just outright memorize, especially if you're not mathematically inclined and it's a struggle to sort of comprehend the underlying math. You might just have to memorize solutions. Might just have to, if you don't understand a hash map, you might just have to memorize how to make a hash map and what the input and output is, and what the structure of it is, even if you don't understand it. Like that's my experience with recursion. I still don't understand recursion, but I've memorized what it looks like and how to use it. If you asked me to explain it, I still couldn't. I don't know. I have A and I have B, but somehow B exists before A, but A requires B in order to exist. I don't fucking know how it works. It's magic. I didn't get a CS degree, so anything I don't understand in the computer is magic. So the second 12 months, about half your time should be interview prep, and most of that time should be algorithms. The stuff that isn't algorithms should just be high-level conversation. You should have the ability, once again, GPT is perfect for this, or any Grok, whatever you want to use. Go to Grok or GPT and say, I want you to help me practice high-level conversation about software systems. So an interview question I've gotten a couple of times now in interviews is, I want you to talk through XYZ system. I want you to talk through a system that does ABC. I want you to talk through a distributed system, a microservices system. I want you to talk through a system on AWS. I want you to talk through a system, this, that, and the other. And practicing those conversations to the extent where it's just second nature to you. That's something that you can do without a CS degree. That's something you can do without, um, you can do that alone. It's going to be very laborious. It's going to take a lot of time. Everything that I'm talking about here is going to take a shitload of hours, and you have to accept that going into it. This is thousands of hours just to set foot in, just to open the door. You haven't even taken one step on the path yet. Just to open the door to the industry, you're going to be in thousands of hours. However, if you're somebody with a longer time horizon, like 2 years, I think that is a fantastic plan, especially because if you take my advice and you lead with your own personal interests, that guarantees that if your personal interests are of legitimate value and if you truly have a passion for the code, there's a non-zero chance that you never even bother looking for a job, because somewhere in that 2 years, you create something with real value, and then you're just an independent worker. You're an entrepreneur now, and you're trying to sell your application, or you're trying to sell your SaaS services, your software as a service services. You're trying to sell something that you made that has legitimate value. And you might get to the end of the 2 years and realize you don't even need to look for a job, or looking for a job would actually be a step down from what you're doing. And you can just be freelance, or you can run your own consulting company and you be the sole worker. But this sets you up, I think, with the best possibility of either not needing a legitimate software job, or by the time you do need one, you are extremely experienced and capable to pass the interview. Ironically, passing the interview is actually more important, because the interview will almost never test you, in my experience, on the technology that's actually being used. So in hindsight, there were plenty of jobs where I didn't get through the interview, or I got through and I just wasn't good enough. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. I just got outcompeted by the other candidates. And in hindsight, they didn't test me on anything that would have actually been required for the job. So I could have applied to the job and gotten through the entire interview process without knowing literally any of the technology that the actual job claimed to require. And when you're working on that level, especially if you're working on things that are sort of connected, like I'm a React guy. If I know Vue as well, but if I didn't know Vue and somebody threw me into a Vue project, I could probably pick up Vue before anybody learned that I don't have a background in Vue. And so, in hindsight, I think interview preparation is even more important. But I think that you should spend that first year working on your own stuff, on your own personal interests, in regards to software, because that's how you'll discover the passion. That's how you'll discover whether or not you even want to do this as a job, whether or not you can stomach looking at a computer for thousands of hours, which is a tough part of the industry. Sincerely, sitting down is so unhealthy. You have to either stand or lay down. I have a lay down setup in that room, and I have a standing setup here. Never sitting down. Sitting is the new smoking. Anyway, subscribe to my channel and buy my book, Seeking Squalor, Toilet Umbrellas and Champagne Chandeliers, on Amazon. And comment down below and let me know how you would get into the industry if you got in these days. I didn't bother talking about specific technologies. I suppose to touch on that, JavaScript, but let's be real, JavaScript's also the most commonly known, so it's probably the lowest value. If you want to be a tryhard, you could go to something like C++ from day one. It's going to be a lot larger learning curve, but then once you have some actual competency in it, it's going to be much more valuable. Something in between might be like Python. .NET is very in demand. Java is very in demand. So that's another thing that you should consult with GPT and ask GPT for pros and cons. And GPT will probably tell you the same things I just told you. JavaScript's easier than C++, but it's also less valuable. So you're going to have to make those decisions. And there's an infinite amount of tech to learn, so you're going to have to very frequently decide to retain ignorance. Like, I would love to write more Python. I've only done a couple of personal projects in Python. I've never used Python for a professional project, but I would love the opportunity to get really good with Python. But I just don't have the time. I'm not on any official Python projects. And so it's like, how much time can I justify spending to learn a language that I don't use? Realistically, I can't justify any. I mean, I'm doing everything in my power just to become good enough with the thing that I use every day. I can't just like take on this additional task. So that's part of being an engineer, is just deciding I'm going to remain ignorant in this and that and this and that and this and that. And yeah. And where that changes is where your employer one day reaches out and goes, hey, do you want to learn this? And you go, fuck yeah, I do. Because if your employer is going to put you onto something, that's the best way to learn it. Not just because you're getting paid to learn it, but also because you're going to actually be exposed to real projects. I think the biggest project I ever made in Python was a StarCraft 2 bot, which, I mean, let's be real, that was not applicable to the job market. All right, that's enough. My fucking battery's about to die. Seeking Squalor, toilet umbrellas and champagne chandeliers. Buy it on Amazon. Take care.